Alrighty, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me and everything is all set up all right. My name's Steve. I'm from Ace Previews. I know you've probably seen me on a couple of the other periscopes that we've been doing over the last couple of months. I just thought I'd do something a little bit different tonight, have a little bit of a look at some of the Australians that we have in action across all levels of the tennis tour in the coming week. Something a little bit different because I guess particularly for Australians who are perhaps interested in tennis, we don't get a lot of coverage year round outside of the Grand Slams. It's basically we'll get the Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, US Open. If Barty wins a tournament, if Kyrgios smashes a racket, or if Tomic says something stupid, is about the extent of what we generally get. So I thought I'd give a little bit more coverage and just give a quick summary of kind of where some of the players are targeting this week on the tour, and we'll look at both the men's and the women's, as well as a quick look at the challenger level, as well as the ITF tournament that's going on in Perth this week. So we'll get stuck straight into it, and if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them as we go along, and I'm happy to answer them or do what I can. We may as well start at the top. Ash Barty, world number one, first tournament back since the Australian Open, where she lost to Sophia Kenin. Obviously, that caused a little bit of controversy in terms of how that was handled and presented at in the Australian media, in terms of her January being disappointing. She actually increased her lead at the top of the rankings and was able to win a tournament on home soil, which was massive for her from just a general confidence perspective, looking to the years ahead. Bit of an unknown here because we haven't seen Barty, as I said, since the Australian Open. It's been a shoulder injury that's kept her out. She is the favourite. I guess it's a matter of whether she's a worthy favourite in what looks to be a very, very competitive draw in Doha. We'll know a little bit more about where she's at after her second round match, which is against Laura Siegemund, who looked pretty solid in her first round match, but it was to be expected that she would win quite comfortably with that 6-3, 6-2 win over Shvedova, who is coming off a long layoff, using a protected ranking. So the courts are a little slower here, so they will give her a chance to use her variety a little bit more in her favour. But it's going to be an interesting one. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be jumping in at the price that's there on offer at the moment for her. I'd like to see her on court first, particularly coming off a bit of an injury layoff. But her draw does look pretty solid. Someone who is actually in her quarter is the second Australian that we're going to talk about, and the only other one left in the draw. So we've got Alia Tomljanovic, who's ranked 57 at the moment. She did a fantastic job in round one of beating fellow Australian Priscilla Hon. That was 6-2, 6-4, that result. I think we all kind of expect big things from Tomljanovic, and she just hasn't quite taken that next step in terms of her ability and her level. She looked really, really good in round one. I mean, Hon was pretty solid in qualifying, and Tomljanovic did a great job of taking control of that match early, and then going on with it. These matches, like this round two match against Muguruza, this is the type of match that we need to see her to take the next step. So, that's a rematch from the Australian Open, where Muguruza obviously did get the win there and go on to the final. I think this is a real opportunity for Tomljanovic to take a scalp and to take a big name. Muguruza didn't look fantastic against Kasatkina yesterday in the first round. I think they were nearly 3 hours on court. Muguruza had to face, I think it was 30 break points across the entirety of the match, and just didn't look that comfortable on the slower hard court. So it's a real chance here for Tomljanovic to flip the script and turn the tables on what happened in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. And that ranking of 57, she is better than that. I think it's just a matter of getting that consistency and being able to build on that across the next phase of the year, and really look to try and gain some ascendancy and confidence in her game heading into that Indian Wells Miami stretch. So that's one to watch, and I give her a massive chance tomorrow against Muguruza, and it is that type of match that she really does need to win to take her game to the next level. Not a lot to talk about at the women's top level this week. So we'll quickly jump over to Acapulco, where we have Nick Kyrgios as the defending champion. Obviously ranked 20 in the world at the moment. Again, haven't seen him since the Australian Open. I think it was a wrist issue that kept him out of Delray Beach last week. Bit of a tricky one. I mean, he's in the similar way to Radu Albot at Delray Beach. I think Kyrgios was always going to come and give this a go. It was very well documented his week here last year. He was out late most nights and still performing exceptionally well on the tennis court. There's that memorable victory over Nadal and then that almost whitewash of Alexander Zverev to claim the title. Again, it's going to be tricky to see where he's at. It's as we saw, there were a lot of distractions. There's a lot going on, particularly during this tournament. If he's not at 100%, it's going to be really, really tough for him. Again, the draw isn't particularly friendly for him either. We've got Nadal obviously as the favourite, but I think that the draw overall does look a little bit more competitive to last year. So he's got a first round match against Humbert, and then would have to play the winner of Millman and Fritz in the second round. So he's going to need to be on from the start. Humbert has been a little bit up and down to start the year. He probably hasn't reached the heights that we perhaps expected due to late, what we saw late in 2019, and particularly at that challenger level, progressing up and starting to play well at majors. Humbert was pretty poor against Nishioka in Delray Beach. It wasn't a fantastic performance after the rain delay, so he was leading quite comfortably there, and even went on to lose the third set 6-love. The positive, I suppose, with it is Kyrgios. Generally, the better the opponent, the better performance we do see from him. I think you'd be a very, very brave person to be jumping into Kyrgios in the outright market at the price that's on offer, just because of the question marks around his fitness, and if he's physically not there and things start to waver a little bit mentally, then it might get a little bit tricky for him, particularly as the week progresses, and because he is defending so many points from last year. Speaking of returning from injuries, we have the number 24 ranked Alex de Minaur making his return. So we didn't see de Minaur at the Australian Open. We last saw him on court in what was one of his probably most impressive matches in recent memory against Rafael Nadal at the ATP Cup. That first set in particular was some of the best tennis I've seen from him in quite a while. However, it did lead to a significant injury and an abdominal tear. So this is the first time we've seen him back. Again, for a player who relies so much on his fitness and timing and movement on the court, I think I'd probably like to see him maybe play a tournament or two before jumping into him on an outright perspective. Again, like a lot of them, it's a very tough first round match for him as well. I think he's got Kekmanovic in the first round and a potential meeting with Rafael Nadal in the second round. So it's straight back into it for him. But I think it's just good to see him back on tour, and hopefully can get a couple of matches under his belt in the lead up to Indian Wells and Miami in particular, because it is going to be an interesting phase here for him, as he won't be defending many points between now and Wimbledon, or as many as he can probably earn, given his injury issues that he did have last year. So again, another one to watch, but a bit of a tricky draw for Alex this week. Speaking of a man who normally does get a number of tricky draws, we have John Millman. So obviously we saw Millman at the Australian Open come very, very close to knocking off Roger Federer in that 5th set tiebreak. Wasn't at his best last week. Lost in the first round to Nishioka from a setup. Granted, Nishioka did go on and make the final, so there is some solid form around that. As I mentioned before, he's in a tough section, so he's got Fritz first up, and then potentially Kyrgios or Humbert, and that's just to get out of the second round. It's a very, very loaded third quarter in that Acapulco draw. There is probably the one advantage perhaps is that Auger Aliassime might be tired from his back-to-back long weeks in Europe and now transitioning over to Acapulco. But it's a tough ask for John. I think for him to be able to improve his rankings and take that next step, he needs to win these first round matches like the one he has against Fritz, and just build that consistency, to try and push his way up into the the top 32, or looking into that position to be seeded at Grand Slam level, which would be huge for him given the past difficulties he's had with some pretty poor draws. And we've got one more as a lucky loser entrance into the draw in Alex Bolt. So Jordan Thompson unfortunately has had to pull out with I believe it was a neck injury or a neck complaint, so he's pulled out of the singles and the doubles in Acapulco. As a result, Jung has taken the position to play Zverev in the first round, and that's opened up a lucky loser position, which Alex Bolt was able to take. So again, sitting at 132 in the world, we're looking at probably a couple of lean weeks for Bolt, in terms of what we know he can produce at this level. He's let a couple of leads slip, and was right in it again against Zumher in qualifying, but as I said, lucky loser position for him, and it might be quite lucky considering Auger-Aliassime, as we said before, has had a busy couple of weeks. So watch this space. He could be able to get off to a bit of a good start there, but it would be tough after considering how Bolt did play in Adelaide as well. I think that was against Auger-Aliassime as well. So that is all we have at the top level for the men and the women. The advantage of having tournaments, so obviously we've got the tournament in Chile as well. It means that there's a lot of opportunities at challenger level for a lot of those guys who perhaps can't get into a lot of these challenger draws due to their ranking. So we'll just quickly look over those just to finish off for today. So in Calgary, we've got Grills, Mott, and Bersher featuring in. It's a pretty impressive draw considering, as I said, that the overall tennis population is pretty spread out across the continents. So they're all looking, and particularly Blake Mott, who's on that comeback with not a lot of points to defend. The fact that he can get into these draws and try and make a push for some ranking points is really it's huge for him. Grills and Bersher, I think Grills is probably a little bit more limited and was lucky to get into the draw here. So I guess I'm probably not expecting as much from him. But it's interesting. It's a great opportunity for these guys to try and earn some points overall. Now, if we head over to Columbus, we've got, again, a very, very heavy Australian contingent in Columbus, led by, I think we've got the top seed in Chris O'Connell. So Chris will be looking to try and bridge that gap that he has currently, toward the top 100. So he doesn't have many points to defend over the next couple of months, and I think he's just over 100 ranking points off the top 100. So he's edging ever closer. So these opportunities, I mean, he made the semi-final last week, and probably should have won that semi-final on form and talent, and just let that opportunity slip. So hopefully with the first round bye here, you can have a little bit of a rest and come back and attack this week. We've also got the number 2 seed with Mark Polmans. Another opportunity here for Mark, who we saw he was able to beat Kukushkin at the Australian Open and try and build those points a little bit. He has been working a lot on his fitness to try and play out these matches a little bit more and play a bit more on tour. First round bye obviously helps, but the first seeded player that he's slated to play is Rodionov, who has been in some pretty solid form recently. But these are the opportunities, as I said, for O'Connell, for Polmans, and even Harris, Kubler, Vukic, and JP Smith. They all have a chance to take a solid chunk of points here. And what probably isn't the strongest field at challenger level. I mean, Vukic has played very well over the last couple of months and is now got him into a position to be a seed here, which has granted him the first round bye. So there's a lot to keep an eye on this week at challenger level from an Australian standpoint. And obviously, it must be mentioned that John Patrick Smith did a great job last week taking the doubles out with Luke Saville, who continues his rise in the doubles rankings. So it'll be interesting to see how Saville goes as well with that juggling being a top 40 doubles player at the moment, as well as trying to keep pushing from a single standpoint. And I'll just quickly touch on one of the ITF tournaments in Perth. Obviously, it's a really important time for a lot of the players who are playing those these tournaments here in Australia, because we don't get the opportunity to play that many, and to be able to build up your rankings to get to a point to be able to look to travel overseas is a big deal for some of these players. Some of the names to keep an eye out in Perth are Rodionova, Flawless, Destiny Iova, and Abby Myers are some of the Aussies to keep an eye on. Obviously, Maddie Inglis did a fantastic job claiming the title last week against Iova in the final. So they're just a couple to keep an eye on there. But obviously, as you can see, across all the levels, there's quite a lot to look at. But there's a lot of question marks as well. So as we said, we've got Barty, Kyrgios, Demonor. They're all coming back from injury layoffs. So I wouldn't be expecting too much, but I'd be happily surprised if some of those players could come out and really bring their best performances so soon after a long layoff. Ilya Tomljanovic, like I said before, one to watch. I think she's a great chance against Muguruza, based on what I've seen recently from her. So they're a couple to keep an eye on, and we'll give a little bit of a recap maybe in the middle of the week if a couple of these players are performing really, really well. I guess from my perspective, looking forward this week, looking to do another one of these Periscopes on Wednesday. I'll have a guest with me for that, just to recap some of the action at the top level over the first couple of days, and then we'll see how we go from there. If you have any questions or any comments, concerns, queries, by all means, don't hesitate to get in touch, either on, we've got Twitter, so ace_previews, Facebook under the group Ace Tennis Previews, Instagram with the title Ace Previews, and we're looking at also building this into having a YouTube channel and a place to kind of record and keep all of this content. As I said, any questions, yell out, and I will see you back here on the live streaming on Wednesday morning Australian time. I'll catch you then.